Hi everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I apologize to the people standing and sitting on the floor. This is a good problem to have, I think, that we've attracted so many people to our little library. So thank you for coming. My name is Hannah Parker. I'm a librarian here at the Fremont branch of the Seattle Public Library, and I'd like to welcome all of you. I'm thrilled to see you all here today. We are here because we are celebrating the release of this beautiful new book, Seattle Now and Then, by Paul Dorpat and Sherrard. And it just came out last month. There was a big launch at the Central Library on Paul's 80th birthday.
Yeah. I don't recommend it.
So we were honored as a library system to help him celebrate that, and then to have, I believe, 180 people show up for that event downtown. So today, this is happening thanks to our partnership with the wonderful Fremont Historical Society, especially Judy. They're the ones who helped and for providing all of the refreshments. Let's save a snickerdoodle for Laura. Also, the Queen Anne Historical Society. Where are you?
There.
Thank you. So yeah, so they help make this possible by connecting us with them, and then of course a lot of promotion and the snacks. So thank you for that. This building, if you've never been here before, the main part of the library is right above us. It's a lovely little library. I hope afterwards you'll take the time to go up the stairs, look at our collection. We have a special display geared towards this program, so a lot of Seattle-related books that you can take a look at, and a really cool a print of the Fremont Historical Society standing at the end of the bridge, and then the then photo, and the two merged. One of the staff members here made that. It's very clever, and I hope you'll take a look at that.
Who took that picture of the society at the bridge?
I think it was Gene.
It was Gene.
Yes. So we give him credit on the photo at the library. We're very careful about that. So yeah, Gene took that photo. So I hope you'll explore that, the rest of the library. Just curious, how many of you drove here today? Just a show of hands if you drove a car. Not a lot. Okay, we're always interested to see if people drive here or if they walk, take buses. So thank you. The one big change to this building in the last couple of weeks is how the restrooms operate. So I want to clarify that. They are now permanently locked. The doors are like a hotel room door. So in order to enter the restroom, which is, there's one down here right around, if you go to the right and another right, you'll need this key. It's very tempting to accidentally lock the key in the restroom. Don't do that. Yeah. Bring the key out with you. Hang it on the door. If you come back here and let someone else in, but you put the key on the wall, someone else might walk in on that person. So make sure there's key transfer.
Has that ever happened to you, people walking in? It's not something you want.
No, it's not. So I'm just trying to train people now about the handoff of the key, and it'll be right there. We have one more upstairs. If you go up the stairs, there's another restroom. It has its own key. That's at the check-in, check-out desk there, so just grab that. So that's my little housekeeping thing. Again, thank you all for being here. We want to celebrate this incredible book and the legacy of Paul Dorpat. I don't know how many of you have been reading the columns since 1982 when they started. 36 years, 1,800 columns. Many of us, I know I have learned so much about the city that I love by reading these columns. The stories are told in a way that make history so accessible, and then the now photos, which Gina's been taking for the last dozen years, they really help me orient, oh, this is where that was. And then I hope you also go to the pauldorpat.com website.
Well, wait a second, that's the Dorpat Sherrard Lamont.
Oh, it is? That's right. You know, I just noticed that last night. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's give you
He does all the work.
It's wonderful because it amplifies those articles. So you see in today's paper, for example, that wonderful story about Skid Road and Occidental, and there are two photos, and it's lovely, but when you go to the website and you see all the other photos and more of the story, you learn so much. And so you're also going to be using...
Thank you very much. That's the best thing anybody ever said.
No. librarian, I am the daughter of a history teacher. It's heaven. So, we can nerd out on this stuff all
Really
day.
is worth going looking at. How many of you go look at the blog? Raise your hand. But really,
It's
that's
so
where you
good.
need to go. You can look at the paper for a moment, then go to the blog.
Yes, because there are all these, in the article, it talks about these interim steps, the Seattle Hotel, like today's article, and there are more photos online that show you those places. So there's also going to be a chance to order the book online on their website, because as you may have noticed, we don't have physical books here today, but I'm going to let Jean explain that. So we're thrilled to have you here. What an honor. Please join me in welcoming Jean Sherrard.
Well, thanks for having us. I think this is our, what is it, Clay? Is this our 12th
13th out of 22.
show? Wow. So every show we add a different element, and it's provided by Paul. I don't know what he's going to do today. You'll find out. It will be as big a surprise to me as it is to you.
Today is the cookie giveaway. Like a cookie?
I think they've got it. But straight from Paul, that would be a special.
No. He's not paid to do this either. Let's go.
Are you going to use the mic
I think I will use the mic as we start. Why don't we begin?
for the radio?
Yeah. Is it better if I use the mic for the radio? Or does that help at all?
Yes.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, so Paul and I will go back and forth with the microphone. Ooh, there's a nice little echo effect. So imagine now that we're in the Taj Mahal.
Yes, the first meeting for the Fremont Historical Society was in this room about 7 or 8 years ago, and Moy, was the presenter, and we had a great time, I remember. Heather was sort of the creator of the society, but of course she's not here today. She's down at the market creating new societies. I forgot what I was going to ask. Shall we proceed? Shall we go forward? Yeah. Well, we've begun every show with a little retrospective, a little history. So let's begin there. Well, let's start off. Notice the face.
He's hurt his neck.
Well, this is your life, Paul Dorpat. Oh, nice echo. This is your life, and here we begin with a picture of Paul in the war years, Second World War. And tell us about this photo.
Are you guys really interested in this stuff?
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much. This is the backyard of the parsonage on Reeves Drive in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Year is about 1942, maybe. I don't know how old would that kid be? Not 8. No, I was 6 when we moved to Spokane. So you're way off. You're way off.
That's actually a real gun. So this is how it was in North Dakota in
Now,
1943.
Gene's question, what is this? This is called Saving the World for Democracy.
And that's where Paul began.
You did a lousy job, didn't you?
Here we have, now this is, I think, let's call this our first now and then, or then and now, because we're going to see, you see the little baby in the photo, and of course, who is that, Paul?
It's a tremendously charming child. I don't know who it is. But next to him are his 3 brothers. Ted, the oldest, lower right corner, who was a psychoanalyst here in Seattle for many years until his demise, maybe 7 years ago. Then brothers Norm and Dave. And the one in the upper right-hand corner, Norm, was an employment manager at Washington Water Power. The progressive Dorpats were in the front row, and the conservative ones were in the back.
Well, let's look at them about 15 years ago when I took this picture of these 4.
Yeah, Ted, Norm, Dave, and me, and that was it. All these guys are now gone. I'm the only remaining one of the family, except for, of course, the kids, of course. Who pays much attention to them?
There we go. Well, what a handsome family, and they all had.
That's a good point, because you can see the guy that's second from the left, that's Norm. He was always the handsome one. You can see that, can't you? Yeah, he was a beauty.
Was he a preacher?
No, but he should have been.
He's the only one with a wine glass.
What's that?
He's the only one with a wine glass.
No, we were Lutherans. You can drink all the wine you want if you're a Lutheran. You're thinking of Presbyterians, I think, maybe.
No, there's a wine glass in the photo.
No, but he can drink all the wine he wants as a Lutheran.
That's fine. Well, here's his Lutheran daddy, who was a pastor in Spokane at the. Wasn't it a Missouri Synod church at that moment?
We usually hide that, but yeah, it was Missouri Synod. Anybody know the Missouri Synod here? Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Well, you're forgiven.
And there's his mom, Cherry, off to the side and so.
You think my mom and I look alike at all?
Yes.
Do you really?
He doesn't have a beard.
Yeah.
That's true. You know, I love this indulgence of me. I love this show. How many more of these we got to do?
Well, this part of the show will only last for 2 hours. And then we spend about 5 minutes on the book. So let's go forward to mid-late 60s, and I actually realized that some of these photos I would clip out and put them on my wall when I was 10 years old, just to offend my parents.
Your parents were so really kind and helpful. I don't imagine you offending them. That must be things that kids do to their parents.
But of course, Paul was the founder and editor of the Helix, and he was joined by Walt Crowley.
Yeah, Walt came in. The second issue, he was the Wunderkind. Had the capacity of drawing good cartoons, and of many of them, in any particular night, multiple, the Wunderkind. Well, he was 19 years old when he started.
I love this poster because, of course, out of the Helix came festivals, in particular the Sky River Festival. Wasn't this drawn by Walt?
Walt did this, yeah, it's unusual for him to do. Yeah, this is unusual for him.
But that's kind of glorious. And I
Any of you go to the Sky River Festival?
Oh, there's an attendee.
There.
All right. Another? Yes.
Another?
3.
Very good.
We see 3. Well, you.
You can sneak in.
If
No, it was $2.
If you went to the Sky River Festival, Paul will lick a cookie for you.
What year was this?
There was 3 of them. The first one was 68, 69, and 70. This one is 68. And this one is 68 too. And this was a saffron Buddhist robe someone gave me, which I wore to be in line with the eccentricities of the particular moment. And that's a friend, the novelist. Okay, who is that guy next?
Tom Robbins.
How do you know that?
Recognize.
You recognize his face, probably, don't you? Yeah, that's Tom there, and that's the kind of places people stayed in at the festival. So, you know, covered with bushes and stuff, because it rained most of that festival. And when Anne Haig over down the lower right corner, we and her 2 children lived together at this time. And that was, anyway, okay.
Well, it's important. Because I like you mentioned that these are the structures that you stayed in, and often they were not waterproof, which resulted in certain other pictures like this one.
They stopped. They stopped the rain momentarily. Is what they did.
I love it. Anyone here in this photo? We're always
No one here. Oh, shucks. Again. We'll hit it one of these days.
Well, we're going to jump another 10 years to 294 glimpses, and Paul sold this, of course, for 294 cents. And within about within a few months, he started his Seattle Times column.
That's true, Gene.
Okay. And here is Paul with another Seattle luminary, and you may all remember.
This one gives me credibility.
Yeah.
That is, who is that? Huh, you guys? Murray Morgan. How many of you read a Murray Morgan book? Raise your hand if you have.
That's
Raise your hand higher,
Yeah,
please.
Skid Row.
How many of you read Skid Row? Okay, well, that's a great history of Seattle. You should pick it up and read it. It's written so well. I mean, the rest of us are really love his writing, you know, and wish we could do it as well as he does. But
Well, I think you mentioned that Skid Row has never been out of print. In fact, they just released a new printing of the Skid Row. So it's seminal history and teaches you how to think about it.
very good. It was 52 or 3. It was for the first centennial of the city that it was published. So 50s, mid-50s, early 50s, sorry.
I love this photo because it has Paul sitting with Lucy Campbell Coe in the early 80s or mid 80s, and I think he guessed that he's probably over in that period he probably interviewed 5 or 6 not only survivors but witnesses of the Seattle fire, and Lucy Campbell Coe was a child at the time, and so
Not that big, not this big. I mean, when the fire was, yeah, they were kids. But there were a few of them still around, and once you mentioned the name of one, they often knew the others. So that's all true, there's no kidding.
Well, by January 17th of 1982, Paul had started his first column, and we're now going to jump forward to a show that we did together. I joined him for a book project that we did called Washington Then and Now, and we released that about 11 years ago. And so I started, around the same time, I started taking the pictures for the column more frequently. And I think out of the 1,800 columns, I've done maybe nearly 600 photos. So it shows you just how long Paul's been doing this particular column, but he amassed such an incredible body of history in now one place, because what we're dedicated to doing now is putting up every column Paul wrote, which does not exist anywhere else in the world, on the pauldorpat.com blog. And so there will be a link to it so you can go back and see PDF searchable columns, and we might be missing a handful, but for the most part we've got them all. So. He's going to take a nap. So we did a show together in 2011. It was the last big show at Mohi before they moved to their current digs.
How big was it?
It was so big. I don't know. I can't even answer that. It was in the big room. Some of you may have gone to this show. And we had the fortunate partnership of Bérengère Lemont, who filled up the foyer with photos of Paris now and then. So, of course, she brought the very first photo ever taken of a human being and of a city, of a fellow getting his shoes shined on the streets of Paris. And then she found Daguerre's apartment, because it was taken in 1838, and she shot through the window down to over Place de la Concorde, and that was her contribution to our show. So we've been very close with Bérengère over the years. She actually came for Paul's birthday a couple of weeks ago. And this is from 2011. We're standing on Paul's back porch. And now I'm going to play you a little video.
He looks very much like me, doesn't he? He does. With the glasses, with the glasses. Take this video. Okay.
We were walking the streets of Paris in 2005 with Bérengère, and we came across this guy sitting at a cafe. And it was so stunning to the three of us that... So Bérengère and I almost got to have him go back, and she's going to pull out her camera and take a photo. But look at the expression on their faces as we zoom in.
That's Gene laughing, he can hardly hold the camera.
I love that last image because they both look up and they have exactly the same expression. So this is the photo that Baron Sherrard
Who
took.
is that, Gene?
Let's go forward. So Baron Sherrard went back about over several years, and I think this was in 2013 that she went back and found him. And here he is today. He's a Romanian Orthodox priest. And he won some award for restoration of his church in central Paris. And, but he too was very amused to find out that he had a double in Seattle.
He hasn't visited us yet, though.
All right, well, that's the end of our first 2 hours. Now we begin. The book is comprised of about 100 selections from the 1800 columns, and we start chronologically with the very first column that Paul wrote. And this is 1919. It's the return of the 63rd Coast Artillery to Seattle from the First World War, and there was a huge celebration on the streets.
There certainly was. Go ahead.
Oh. Well, it's down at 4th and Pike. We're looking at Westlake. And I went down, and one of my jobs over the last 2.5 years has been to repeat photos with something approaching, in my feeble efforts to attempt to repeat something significant that matches the old photo. So here we have this marvelous celebration of the return of the sons of the city. And I thought, well, what better counterpoint than January 21st, 2017, which is the largest march ever in the streets of Seattle.
How many of you were marching? Most of you are women, aren't you? Thank you for going. Gene was there, but my knees were, by then, had flown away somewhere.
Well, here's Paul's picture that he took that accompanied your first column of the same corner with the barista holding the picture.
What's the name of that theater there? We see with the classical frontis. Anybody remember the name of that?
Coliseum.
It's not the Coliseum.
Colonial.
What is it?
Colonial.
Colonial, I think so.
Colonial.
Yeah, right.
Colonial had a black.
Well, then what was it?
It looks,
You're very
looks like the
confident.
Coliseum.
You know, what's terrible, it's not the Coliseum because it's on 4th across from Westlake. But if anyone wants to look up on their phone, we just did this column about three months ago. Embarrassing.
I'm sorry, I don't remember it, but that's part of reaching the age of 80. Is it 80 or 88? Am I 88 or 80?
We're lucky
80.
Yeah, this wasn't on the court?
This is looking up 4th Avenue. Yeah, you can see the picture in the column. I'm standing on
Maybe the Capitol.
east side of 4th.
Capitol?
No, let's take a look.
Sorry to have brought it up.
Is the Triangle building still there?
No, that was,
That's one of our lost flat irons.
that was replaced with another drugstore, what's the name of the big drugstore?
Bartel.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. Which was just 2 stories high, but who sold a hell of a lot of my books, I'll tell you that, in the 80s. So it was hard to criticize them.
All right, so we'll jump now to Seattle's biggest snow.
It's 80. It's 80. The age of someone in this room.
Well, it covered, in about 8 days, starting on January 4th, it covered 64 inches of snowfall. And even the 16 snow did not match this one.
That's Yesler's Hall there on the right, which was the place where so many things happened in Pioneer, Seattle. And then the house behind it, 2nd Avenue, is Wyckoff, who was the sheriff. And then the church behind that is the Baptist Church on 4th Avenue. And then you have the ridge of First Hill, but that's the ridge between 5th and 6th Avenue, because actually First Hill has a little dip there on the other side to the east of 5th and 6th, and then it rises again to go up to 9th. That's one of the joys of doing local history, is you get to study topography. Go ahead.
Well, let's look at it today. And again, I had to go back in the last, snow that took place. Oh, it was deep, Paul.
This is heroic. This is heroic. Catch this. Grab it while you can.
There's a little pile up on the fire hydrant on the This is from February of 2017. And that was the last time I could.
Yeah. Somebody's disagreeing with you, right? Huh?
Oh.
Okay. No, I guess not.
Wow. So down on the waterfront now, we visit using the photographs of the great Norwegian photographer Anders Vilse, who took this photo in the late 90s and was only here for a few years before his wife summoned him back to Norway.
Where she had preceded him for a visit to the family. And he expected to follow her, and then they would join together and come back to Seattle, where they had been for about 10 years.
But he left behind a body of some spectacular photographs, which, and then when he moved back to Norway, became a sort of a national treasure of Norway. But this is one of his classic waterfront photos, and I went back to pretty close to the same spot.
Who are those kids, Gene?
Ooh, these are my students. I teach theater about a quarter of every year. And in fact, one of my former students is standing in the back. This is Robin Rosu, who's a librarian. And Robin played a magnificent puck. So after the show, you might ask her to think the final speech from, which I'm sure she still has memorized from Midsummer Night's Dream. So
Now, I should say something more about the family relations with Wilsey, is that he had intentions of coming back to Seattle, where he was doing very well, but his wife said that it was it. The family was over if he wanted to come back. They were staying in Norway, which they did.
And here's another Vilse down on the waterfront, and this was taken, it's kind of marvelous, because it was taken during the height of the gold rush. And this is a fair amount of time after the fire. This is probably 98, maybe 99.
About 8 years after the fire.
And what you're seeing here is a 2-block stretch between Columbia and Madison. And the docks were sort of stubby, but and the service is local. And in the 99 days during the late winter and spring of 98, 107 ships sailed for the Klondike.
Now we have a question here, and we invite you to ask questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, what happened to his gorgeous photos? Are they in Norway or are they here?
The Norwegian photos are in Norway. They're a national treasure. And in fact, they just came out with a stamp collection in Norway based on his, so you can buy Vilse stamps of these sort of marvelous images of Norway. The ones that he took here are still in collections around Seattle and environments.
A lot of them were found on a corner, First Hill corner, in a box by someone who just happened to look in the box, and they were rescued that way. And that was really, well, those are at Museum of History and Industry. That's where they were taken.
Was that a private home that they were found in the box?
But now you're getting into crime and punishment. I don't know the personal life of those scoundrels who left it on the sidewalk, but if we discover them, we're sure that they're punished.
You know, the sad part is
That's
that
about 80 years ago or something.
we have a number of horror stories of boxes of photographs, and one of them being, which we won't get into, but King County Archives has a number of photos that they were getting rid of, and they were what's that little story? And I think you now have possession of quite a few photos of tax records that were being thrown out.
Well, that's true. Should I chew first or what? Well, I mean, thank you very much. Well, a guy brought this box full of tax photos to me to look at. And I still have it because I'm going through them all and scanning them, and then they're going back to the tax department or the tax assessor's office. And then from there, they'll go back and join all the other ones that are over at in Bellevue in the collection over there. So we're doing the good work of scanning them and cleaning them and returning them to the place that one member of that had some power 55 years ago decided they weren't needed, and so gave them up to an employee, said, oh yeah, take them, these are going to be thrown away. So that's typical. You get the individual decision that was a bad decision, and sometimes those things are countermanded, luckily, by a sensitive employee in this case, who was maybe 20 years old at the time.
Yeah. So many stories of
We've done a
near
number
loss
of
and salvage.
stories. We've done a number of stories in the Times, maybe 8 or 7 from that collection. Yeah, those we call them the tax photos. Remember the ones that have the writing on the bottom of them? Yeah. And they were done pretty well in 37, 38, when they were first being done. They were good cameras, good photographers. They had a system down where they were sensible in composition, usually. And so, yeah, it worked out really beautifully. And they did, of course, they did or they were supposed to do, and tried to do every taxable subject in King County. So to people like you and me and like you would pay their taxes.
All right, well, let's look and see where we are on the water. Yeah.
So we had, our realtor who sold us our house as a gift, gave us one of the pictures.
Yeah.
And then we went and found more because it had been taken in one
Subsequent years.
century and then in the 50s again. So the ones that you,
Over the decade.
yeah. So the ones you got, were they ones where the property had been destroyed?
Yes, exactly. It was properties that no longer existed, so which are of interest to us,
Yeah.
but we're not interested in. The tax department had no real use for them.
There were some exceptions to that. There were some where the properties survived.
And we'll send you each one of those if you just give me.
Call me up anytime.
They're treasure for the homeowner, you know.
Let's look at this today. So here's Anders Phillips' photograph of the waterfront during the gold rush. And today, we come back. There we are.
Which one do you like best?
I love the Vilse. Now here's a stamp of when Vilse went back to Norway and spent several decades becoming the great national treasure of Norway. This is one of the stamps that I thought was just kind of magnificent. He does a lot of portraits of people in villages and traditional activities as well.
Was that in the 50s?
This is a recent collection, I think, and he died in, I think he died in 1940, so.
So it was more like the 30s?
This is probably the 20s or 30s, yeah. Now we're looking down, of course, from Smith Tower, and what I'm going to use my pointer here and call. This is the year before Smith Tower was completed, and a photographer went up to the 35th observation deck, 35th floor, and shot one of the first photos looking across the city from a perspective at that spot in the city, which had never been seen before. And so for the first time, you can see Queen Anne from 2nd and James. You can see Jefferson. And you can see Lake Union, and you can see, which of course, if we look at it today, we'll see something similar. But before I flip to the new slide, I want you to just pay attention. Let's see if I can get this going here. Okay. Does it point? I guess it doesn't show up on the screen. Let me just point and watch this slot here. So here is the Rainier Club. There's the Methodist Church. Okay. So watch carefully as we go to our modern, and keep an eye out for Lake Union too.
We have high school up on the Queen Anne building.
Yeah. And there, of course, is St. James. This is 1913, and we'll go to this last year's. And there's St. James still. Yep, and there's the Rainier Club.
What's this big park down the lower right now? What's that one, that big park?
City Hall Park.
City Hall Park? Somebody want to tell the story of that? Come on, extemporaneous, huh?
Well, they tore down the building, which was the jail. I can't remember what its real name was. And then one of our mayors sold the rights to build a skyscraper there. And then a couple of mayors later, resold the rights. And right now it's somehow in hanging somewhere. All we know is that when the skyscraper gets built, it'll be built on the north side of that lot so that the people in City Hall will always have a view to the water. That's all I know.
Well, I think that's a good decision to the north side, because that's the side where the weight is anyway in the other blocks. And I like the idea of that channel of light from City Hall, go across the south side of that block, and then continue down to the waterfront. So.
But the walruses will be obscured then. The walruses will be obscured.
Speak up.
The walruses will then be obscured. Yeah, that's the last building, isn't it?
The walrus.
Arch building.
Well, you all probably know this one. Let's say it all together. Monongahela. Well, this is the Monongahela's escape on March 25th, 1931. And it had been idling Lake Union for 3 years and was finally towed to Eagle Harbor, where just as they were about to close the cantilevers of the Aurora Bridge, and the Monongahela then survived a few more years hauling logs in Vancouver before it was scrapped. But here's a beautiful four-master leaving Lake Union for the last time.
And if anybody wants to see a picture of that from the front, where you see the bow coming right at you, it's hanging in my office because
So we send everyone over.
yeah, it hung in Johnny Franco's Hidden Harbor for 30-some years, and when he closed the restaurant, he gave it to my mother, grease spots and all.
Well, we go forward today.
You serve cookies in your office?
Yes. And Theo chocolate.
Paul will be right over. So let's look at this today. Theo, we'll pause for a little advertisement for Theo. And we go forward now. So here we are today looking across. And to get to some of these heights, I have to use a 21-foot pole that I stab up into the air and put my camera on top of, because there are some places you just can't see from here. And this would typically be obscured by the line of trees that runs along. But that's often how I get into a photograph. Well, now we're going to jump up.
I want to say something here.
Yeah.
Isn't this beautiful?
Yes.
It's got everything in it that you want in a picturesque, city, really. It's got a landmark bridge, a beautiful sky, those boats, and that water. You look like you could swim in that water.
And some people do.
And that is one of the dreamscapes of this book that Gene largely put together, is that he did, and we'll tremendous job of repeating recently all the photos for the articles that go back, how many years? 38? 37 years. So he did all this repetition and spent a couple of years doing it, and you should buy several copies. If not for the history stuff, for these pictures he took of the city. It's a great display of the city.
So before you work up in too great a fervor, we have to announce that we're having a little trade war with China. And the book has been about 6 weeks late because slowdowns in Chinese ports, as we understand it. It is, however, the first prize. It is, however, in the port of Tacoma right now, and they're telling us we can pick it up in the next couple of days. So we missed it by that much. But you're welcome to go to pauldorpat.com and you'll see a little pre-order button, and we're starting to ship them out, signed by me and Paul, or just Paul, and inscribed. So you won't miss out just because we didn't have them today.
Now, if you don't want Gene to sign it, then please say, keep Gene off the page. Right?
And we've had at least 2 or 3 people who say, I only love Paul.
Do we get a discount because we came today?
They'll be easy to con, that's for sure.
So, all right, well, let's go forward now. We're going to go up top. But before we get there, we're going to pause at this key, telegraph key. It's called the Taft key. And it was made, you can look at the exterior of this little Taft key. It's now in the Smithsonian. It's a very significant key to the Northwest because it was actually lined around the outside, and the key itself and all the metal is gold. And it was made with Yukon gold and presented by George Carmack, the man who first discovered gold in the Yukon territories. And it's got 22 solid gold nuggets around the outside. And they were all found by Mr. Carmack. The key itself was presented to President Taft in 1909. And he used it to open the 1909 Yukon-Alaska Pacific.
On what date? What was the date? Do you remember the date?
The date of the opening of the exposition?
Well, it's June 1st.
Oh, it was June 1st.
Yeah, I always remember it because it's my birthday. So.
You have several advantages.
Not 1909.
Well, if we go up top, we'll see one of Clay Eels, our editor of the book, one of his favorite photos in the book, which is
By the way,
this one.
the key was also used to open.
Oh, wait, don't steal my thunder.
Oh.
Just wait, we're getting there. I
Sorry.
will leave it behind. Did you just have too many knowledgeable folks who have birthdays on significant events?
I think that was very clumsy of him.
I'm so sorry. I'll leave.
Don't give him any of those chocolates that are...
I'll forfeit my discount on the book.
All right, so here we are. This is the Aurora Bridge opening. Of course, this is originally, it opened on, this is February 22nd, 1932, George Washington Memorial Bridge. And it's the 200th anniversary of the birth of our first president. So before the bridge was opened, before these crowds streamed onto the bridge from both sides, the speaker of the day was Governor Roland Hartley, who was from Everett. And it was a city-rural divide even then, and he hated big projects like the Aurora Bridge and spoke against it and lobbied against it. But by the time the day came, he was standing on the dais and he spoke volubly and took credit for it. I don't, because I'm featuring the book now, but I do have a couple other pictures.
I'm sorry, what's your name again?
The only reason I asked that question
It's
is
because you have a picture of the ribbon on your wall.
because my mother did the cutting.
Your mother did the cutting? Okay, send us the picture, we'll put it in the next show. So,
We always call that Mother's Day.
February 22nd is then Mother's Day for your family.
Yeah, but of course, it's the George Washington
Memorial, yeah, no, but we'll call it Mother's Bridge.
Yes.
From now on, it's Mother's Bridge to
Mother's
me.
Bridge.
Well, so while the bands are about to play and the choruses are about to sing and the fireboats are about to shoot off their plumes, Herbert Hoover is sitting in, or standing in Washington DC waiting to press the Taft key to start the ceremonies. And at 2:57, that was the time appointed. And so to Hartley's annoyance, Hoover, without knowing he was doing so, interrupted Governor Hartley by pressing the key, and the fireboats shot off, and the flags went over, and the fireworks went off, and the crowd streamed out cheering, and Hartley never finished his speech. And Hartley cut the ribbon when on cue, but Hartley was superseded by Herbert Hoover from a distance. And let's look at it today before we get a glimpse of Herbert himself.
How did you take that? It's not in the same place, Gene.
Well, it's another 21-foot pole shot, because if you go up the hill where the original photographer stood, it's covered with trees. And no one has allowed me to cut them down. There are places I would like to.
Did you wait for that bus or the truck?
I waited for the bus. So here is Herbert Hoover, 1932, and this is when he is actually pressing the key. We know exactly the time, 2:57 Pacific time, on February 22nd, 1932. So, and of course, we'll go a little bit further downstream, and because the next World Fair in Seattle was opened also using the Taft key. And there's John F. Kennedy pressing it.
At least he's on the phone.
At least he's on the phone at the same time. Yeah, that's true.
Not interrupting twice.
That's exactly true. So he knew that he wasn't interrupting anyone. Well, a few months after Kennedy pressed this key, we found the 9 millionth visitor to the fair. And this was young Paula Dahl. And you can see, if you kind of peer in, you can see her parents up there on the left looking on proudly, the enormous stuffed dog that she got, and her very unhappy sister. And there, of course, is on the right-hand side is today's Paula Dahl, taken, this is about 6 years ago, with her elementary school class in Issaquah, still with the 9 million sign, which she displays proudly in her classroom.
Yeah, where's the dog? Yeah.
She doesn't know where the dog went. I think that has to do with the sister. Here we go. One of the few photos of the fire actually as it was burning. And Paul posits that perhaps the photographers were saving their gear and evacuating, because
The
all
1889 fire, you know, the June 6th, 1889, the big fire that destroyed about 30 plus city blocks and the waterfront. So, big deal.
And all of the buildings in this picture were destroyed by the fire, and all the people survived.
Had to make a choice.
And here we are today, first in spring. This is a couple days later, coming back to a very significant portion of downtown, and in the paper, this picture was captioned, "The hideous remains."
Now, this picture shows a guy fifth from the left in a helmet. You see him? Look at the way he's standing with his legs positioned like a model and his arms folded on his chest. This shows you the power of costume. That's not fair.
So here we go.
Oh, but do you know who he was? Was he the fire chief?
We don't know. I don't know if he was the fire there's a lot of helmets in this photo, but the guy who looks particularly like Paul,
I did that on her instructions, on BB's instructions.
Berenger took that photo of Paul. So let's look at this today, and we've got a couple little stories to impart here. And we're pretty close to the same spot, and I want to go back, and I want you to look at, of course, the front part of, what is this structure?
Seattle Hotel.
No, that's part of
The
the
sinking ship. Okay, so let's go back and look at the front of, look at the tall structure in the hideous remains photo. That is the same tiny little stretch of, that's the front of what was then the Occidental Hotel and the bank entrance below. And that became, today, that same spot is the front of the sinking ship garage. So we go forward now, and we're going to do, there's the hotel that replaced the Occidental after it was burned down. On the same footprint, that's the Seattle Hotel, and yes, we'll get to that story, so be assured. And let's look at it today. And this is about 1908, and now we're going to jump forward and look at this sensitive, there we go. It was replaced by the sinking ship garage. And Paul has a little detail that he...
Well, there was a lot of complaints regarding the hideousness of the garage, taking the place of that distinguished hotel. So the architects of it explained that they indeed were sensitive themselves. They've taken some effort to repeat some of the architectural details of the district. And you can see those when you compare the, what's called the basket handle fenestration of the windows in the building across the street there, which is the, what building is that? It's
Merchants.
The Merchants Cafe is next door, I think. But anyway, so what they did is they took the pipes and bent them to be basket handle shaped. You see that on the top? That was their sensitive adjustment.
It's magnificent.
Isn't that just lovely?
Which we are ever thankful.
So we thank those architects for that. They did one other thing.
There is something to say for the fact that that thing has kept its place. No one's torn it down to build a new building. And of course, if you study Pioneer Square history, you kind of understand that, but it's still there. Have you ever parked in there, Gene?
I have parked in there once, but for the most part, there is one significant feature to the sinking ship garage that Seattle preservationists do admire, and that is that the loss of the Seattle Hotel brought about the saving of a number of other Seattle institutions. So the Pike Place Market exists today because Victor Steinbrück, in part, was so offended by the destruction of this magnificent building and the replacement of the building with what we're looking at there. And so we go now to the place that was saved by the loss of the Seattle Hotel. And of course, this is a 1907 photo of the very early, just opening market. And the market today. And it's, I would still argue,
Go ahead, argue.
that this is that as the city is changing so much around us, and as we're looking at it with such alterations on every side, and I'm sure everyone has walked down a street and seen something that's missing from a lifetime experience. And where did that go? Where did the street I walked along to go to school? Where's that now? Well, we can always go back to the market at this point, and that's one touchstone for me in any case. Whenever I want to know where is home, I often end up walking through the market.
They want to put a big 14-story hotel right on the corner with
They do, in place of the Han building. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's one of, we just have to be very careful to hold on but no one's touching the market anytime soon. So that's...
The building with the 14 stories is not in the market district.
No, but it's overshadows it. in a certain-
Yeah, no, we're all sensitive to the fact that it's stupid to do it, but the point is that when the district was drawn, it gave its corner the freedom to go 14 stories.
Another thing that I really appreciate about the market is that there's not a single chain store in the market. They're not allowed. You have to, it has to be unique and individual. And the only reason Starbucks is there is because it's probably the second location of Starbucks. And so it had been there very early
It's the
on.
first store, though. It's the second location for the first store. It's around the block, just
It was
around
gonna
the
be their
corner.
only store, because
was
they were
their
gonna
only
be wholesale.
That's right.
Okay.
Here we have
Let's make it, give it a prize.
we're going to give another cookie, if
Do we
there's
have
one.
any cookies out there?
Where is this?
Whoever gets this correct.
Now, some of you who've been following the column may know that that's the first clue, because this column appeared about 3 years ago.
Where are we here, guys?
Where are we?
Go ahead. Shout out.
Ballard.
Where?
Ballard, this is the mid-50s, 1950s.
Oh, this is like I-5, isn't it?
What?
Isn't this
There we
I-5?
go.
Very good.
Well, I read the column.
Yeah. Oh, look, we have cookies to give away. Come get your cookies.
Oh, that's
Choose
okay.
first.
Come and get your cookies.
Well, I'll share them.
Here you are.
Oh, my, so many.
No, I wouldn't think very much.
Thank you.
No.
So, Gene,
No, we're going forward to,
what street was that got like that?
ooh, let's go back. That was called Melrose Place.
That was not, okay.
And we have Werner Langenhager, who is a Boeing engineer and I think a Swiss photographer, shot both directions. So in the book, they're side by side. You see looking north from this spot and looking south. And this is looking south.
Now just imagine your relatives in Peoria, Illinois. Wouldn't they love to have this book? Right, okay.
So here we are at a popular meeting place in Seattle that for over several decades. And if you wanted to get to this spot, you would say, meet me at the steps. These were the steps. And if you've ever been down to Berkeley and seen their post office down there, their main post office, these steps remind me of the Berkeley steps. You climb up the steps, there's big columns, you go into this magnificent building. Well, this is Third and Union. And we had to get rid of it because evidently the Chuckanet sandstone out of which the steps were constructed and the pillars were stained by pigeon poop. And that was just too much for our delicate sensitivities of our city fathers and mothers. And so they replaced it with something that was, again, sensitive and unstained. And here it is today. It's still a post office. And there's been a Royal Mall across the street.
Could you go back just one real quick?
Yeah, let's go. Isn't that?
So that's Third Avenue.
Okay,
That
guys,
is
here's a
the-
quiz. There's a cookie in this one. What is the skyscraper in the distance? It survived, it's still there.
Josephine.
Yeah, the Joseph.
What's that?
Josephine.
What's that? Yeah, you're right, the Josephine, right. Yeah, Second and Stewart, northeast corner.
They've done some nice
No, the Josephine has let me up on their rooftop a couple times to shoot down Second Avenue, and it's terrifying. Whenever I want to scare Paul, I send him photos standing on the edge of the Josephine shooting.
Right.
It is. And of course, here's Hooverville. We are now, the photographer in the mid-30s was shooting from the now non-existent E.F. Goodrich building. And this is about 250 of the 500 structures that were in what is today the Port of Seattle. on the docks and watch Smith Tower disappear and reappear as we go to today's shot, on which I was allowed to stand atop a hoist. So I got about 35 feet in the air.
Normally it uses pole, it's a big 20-footer, the pole that he carries around, but not this time.
I couldn't reach the third floor height of the building. So.
Again, can you back up?
Oh, yeah.
Think of that relative in Peoria, Illinois. Wouldn't this be sweet? And this on their champagne, now what do you call those tables? Coffee table.
They don't have champagne in Peoria. Well, let's look now. We're back in Fremont. You can see the Fremont Baptist Church up on the hill there. Just this is a corner that I'm sure you all know pretty well. Well, you know, you have to replace these wonderful streetcars in our modern photo with something that's of equal significance. So, and this was one of the last streetcars within several months, all the streetcars had been replaced by gasoline-powered buses.
And the track was trolley too.
And so today, I went back last year to that same spot.
How many of you gone to the parade for, well, you can see what attracts people.
It's a sense of community.
If you went naked, we'd all go.
Oh, here we have another. Well, this features actually. This is a photo that is in the book, and I think it was open before we walked in, and Judy had it to that open to that page. And this is, of course, looking at from another particular location in Fremont. We're at 34th and Fremont, looking to the east.
Yeah, it just looks like a different direction.
It is. Let's look at it today.
There's the organization, see, the Fremont Historical Group Society. Beside it is the duck that ran into my wife's car. And also sank in the lake and a few other things.
There's more than one. I don't know if you know, there's more than one duck.
Just a note, going back on that previous, the tracks are still there.
Yes.
That's the Grand Union was preserved.
Very good.
The tracks are still there.
Here, would you please? Here's a man who actually knows that under that intersection, underneath the
tracks
pavement, remains, go ahead.
The tracks were there when they went to do the new approach a few years ago. My father noticed that they were starting to dig it up, and my dad was, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, we're going to take it up." And he started a little letter writing campaign to preserve the tracks just in case posterity they might be able to be used again. But the Grand Union is one of these in the whole city. So a trolley could come and go in any direction from any direction. So it could go left, right, straight from any direction.
That's what you mean by
And it's
Grand Union.
It's a Grand Union, correct, and it's still there. So underneath that concrete out there, it's still there.
And so when you decide to go in any direction, you know that there's precedent.
Thank you.
Here we are at, this is 1921, a Webster and Stevens studio record of Chinatown's Go-Ing celebration. And this part of King Street has scarcely changed. In fact, it's so similar that if I went down with a black and white camera and got rid of some cars, we could repeat this pretty exactly. So I went down and knocked on the doors of the Seattle Kung Fu Society, where the 80-year-old Sifu John Liang, who's been teaching there since 1960 and was one of Bruce Lee's teachers, brought his entire crew down, and they got in pretty close to the same position. I needed a wider angle lens because you can see they sort of filled up the street. And they brought down all their lion masks and the lion dancers.
Thank you, Peoria.
And we were not worried about filling the street for about 10 minutes because this guy is a West Seattle cop and he sent out.
Anybody know what this is?
Could be Green Lake. That's a very narrow part of Green Lake.
Someone here know? No.
It's related though. What?
Arboretum.
No.
Good guess. Well, here's a clue.
This group only makes good guesses. Anyone else? Shabamish? Huh?
This is the clue, Black River. Stop again.
Who just came up with Black River? You get a cookie, you know, just go and
So let's look at this. That was a canoe trip taken down to the Black River, and this is from a Seattle Post-Intelligencer article published on September 9th, 1906. They journeyed in a flotilla from Lake Washington to Puget Sound.
They didn't make it. They got down there in the Serpentine Duwamish. It was not yet a channel, a carved channel, and they had to get out and trudge in over the farmland. It got too dark for them to navigate.
Here is the Black River today. So it still exists in culverts and occasionally burbles up in swamp form in a Renton Park, not Renton, it's, where's the little park? Is it in Tukwila? And so you can still see remnants of it, but for the most part it's disappeared. And of course that happened because we lowered Lake Washington by 9 feet and lost that one outlet from Lake Washington to the Sound. And these are the faces that launched 1,000 books.
Yeah, that's true. So many thousand actually. They were very popular. That was the cover of the first Seattle Now and Then book, which in every other feature is muchly inferior to this one. And I'm thinking Seattle Now, this one right here. But it did very well. He's reprinted it about 4 times. Seattle Now and Then, Volume 1.
You know, there's another thing that we celebrate about Paul's long tenure at the Times, and that is that there is no other city in this country who has its lake. There's no place else that has a long-running column like you have created over the last 37 years.
I've got a question to ask you. How do you know that?
Clay told me.
I trust Clay. Where's Clay? Right here.
He's our newspaper man. I went back to this spot in the shores of Lake Union, and of course Lake Union also has been a bit subject to development. So these are my neighbor children. This is taken for the Mohi show in 2011, and so I thought, oh, why not go back and see what these girls look like today. And here they are at the same time. That's Tia and Liana Owen.
They live across the street from Gene
They do.
in North Greenwood.
So there's the colloquia in the locks. And of course, the colloquia was known across the entire country. I mean, from, as Paul writes, from Peoria to Peking.
Did I write Peoria?
You did. You wrote Peoria to Peking.
Yeah, I stuck.
And it's, but this is a journey back from Lake Union back to the saltwater. And I had to find a way to repeat it, which would allow for another enormous vessel. So I went back to the locks in spring of 2017, and I found I was given the date and the time when the ship would probably pass through. But I only found out after taking this photo and after we published the book that this is a significant vessel in American history. It's the USS Turner Joy.
Oh, yeah.
And the Turner Joy, of course, was the second boat in the Gulf of Tonkin, along with USS Maddox. And so, to my surprise and delight, this is the USS Turner Joy coming back from a restoration job and back to its berth in Bremerton, where it's a museum ship. Yeah.
How could the Kalakala be going into the Union?
You know, it was coming out of Lake Union.
But it had to get in there, you're right.
Probably for the same reason the Turner Joy was there, which was for purposes of being
I don't know that I know that. It's an excursion. You see all the people up
Yes,
there?
yes.
It could be they just got a free ride back or something and it went in there for dry dock work, but I don't know. I think I did know though, once upon a time.
It came back. It came back because Peter Vivas was gonna fix it up
Yeah,
and
no,
it was
we're not
gonna be a
talking about,
venue.
we're not talking about that. We're talking about this trip.
Oh, this
Yeah.
particular one was when.
This
it was
is
leaving.
This is April 24th, 1947,
Yeah.
when this photo was taken. And they were coming back from Lake Union on an excursion into the Sound. And so this is we just don't know.
It ran the Bremerton run.
It did.
And after World War II, that was.
No, we know the sad. In fact, my mother
And it
lost.
did a whole bunch of other things after that.
My mother lost her front tooth on the Kalakala when she was 16.
Now, did you know that?
But you didn't know that.
Oh, my mother was asked for a donation to fix up that boat.
Yeah.
And she told Peter Vivas, not one dime. That thing kept us awake the whole first year of our marriage as they were tat-tat-tatting building it over at the Yarrow shipyard.
That does explain why you have so many brothers and sisters. I'm just making a guess. No.
Good point, though.
You keep your parents awake, you don't know what they get up to.
Retreat with that story.
So here's the Turner Joy in the Gulf of Tonkin. And here is the Kalakala today, right off of Salty's restaurant in West Seattle. And Clay went back and took this picture of the wheelhouse and shot from inside as well. The skyline.
It's interesting that none of our maritime capitalists locally took the opportunity or the bite to save that ship. That included Ivor too. He didn't do anything about it.
So this is one of those soon to be, we tell some lies in the book, and one of them is that it's now and then, because this will very quickly become then and then. And so this is taken in April of 1953.
Can we take a vote on this?
Sure.
Okay. We have a very strong representative here of the large part of our population that was in favor of keeping the viaduct. And we're going to ask him now to present, and he hasn't been given a warning about this until this moment, to present some good reasons why the viaduct should have been saved. And that is, again, we referred to him many times before tonight, Clay Eels, past editor of the West Seattle Herald and a bunch of other stuff. Clay, come forward, please.
Come forward. Gotta be no.
He's not going to give you a good reasons why the viaduct should not have been destroyed.
You have no opinions, do you, Paul?
I can add them later if you like.
Well, the viaduct is obviously West Seattle's and Ballard's lifeline.
Oh, Fremont.
And the
Or
whole,
Fremont,
absolutely.
yeah, right.
And it's also the most spectacular view in Seattle to get the lay of the land for rich and poor.
Yep.
And it also lets you off and on downtown.
Yeah.
A comparable event for what's happening.
So, shall we vote, or would you like to make the counter? This is like the Oxford Union, isn't it? It's just the Harvard Club. Here we go.
I have a strong sense that this particular group is too hostile towards my position. So I'll pass.
And so this is about as exciting as the Brexit vote. Sort of thrilled. No, I'm taking no position. I'm gonna show my picture though. About a year and a half ago, I went back to close to the same spot. There are buildings now, so I had to go about 50 feet further, shooting from my son's sunroof. That's my son's.
I didn't know the story about the skyscraper.
Oh, it's coming up next. So, above, on the skyline, this is just before they finished this building called the Mark, which stands right up above the Methodist dome. And so this is just a couple months before they completed the final mirror surface on the top of that building. And it's one of the handful of buildings that both Paul and I actually enjoy in Seattle, that we think it's significant.
This doesn't suggest that we're crying or complaining about the other buildings. It's just that we have positive feelings for this building, okay?
Well, only after the book was, we actually started our shows, and someone came up and said, well, you know the inspiration for that building? And I said, no. And so he showed me the following photograph. And this is actually the case, that the developer from Seattle, Kevin Daniels, commissioned ZGF architects with a tall order, and that was that they create a building inspired by this photograph from Breakfast at Tiffany's. Look at the line of her cigarette holder, and now look at the building again from the distance here.
I think it's the line of her hip, though.
Objectifier. Look at the building.
That's true.
Anyway, while they were building it, they had a large poster. They had a large poster in the lobby of the building. So we jump now. Someone mentioned Green Lake before, and I live just a couple blocks away. And this is an Ashel Curtis photo taken from the hill up above Green Lake, looking down. And I went back, and pretty much the only element that's repeated are the mountains in the distance, which you can just see behind the structures.
Look at the crow.
Yeah. So I have to confess, this particular photo was, it was, this is about 6 trips to this location, and I could do it because I only live half a mile away. But I kept going back and trying to find elements that would repeat in ways that were interesting, and this was about an hour or 2 of trip 6 to this spot to get.
The crow seal it for you?
The crow sealed it for me. Yeah.
Okay.
We're coming into the end here, but here's a structure which is very significant in Seattle, and it was given, this photo was given to Paul by another significant figure in Seattle history.
Well, Ivor Haglund. However, Ivor didn't give it to me in the sense that I'm a person who owns property. It's rather that I was assembling an archive for the Acres of Clams, or for Ivor's Inc., which I've completed. And in fact, this coming year, I will get together, and I promise you, I'm not kidding, the book called The Illustrated Ivor, which will be full of jokes, really, primarily. It should be a humor book with a lot of pictures, just the kind of thing we like. And so that's what we're doing in that way.
And on the front porch, in her white apron, her white dress, that is Ivor's mother. And her assembled family, her mother sitting next to her. And this photo, this house was actually built in the early 1860s by a then newly arrived to West Seattle, Doc Maynard.
You could have the guy on the tree as a picture for the definition of insouciance.
Yeah.
Look at that leg.
I missed that whole thing. What was that?
Say it again.
I said the guy on the tree.
Oh, yes.
Actually could be the picture for a definition of insouciance. Just perfect. Look at her.
Yes, and also, he could also be Snidely Whiplash, which is, he's there for the rent.
It's the same angle as the,
Tremendously erudite and sensitive. Thank you for those comments. Now, the right side of this house, after it was moved from the waterfront to where it is now, near the south end of 63rd or 64th?
64th.
64th. That's gone, so it's a truncated house. But the basic shape beyond that is pretty much the same. It doesn't have the same fenestration or windows or ornaments or stairway to the front porch or brick or this and that. But it's pretty much the same. And in the basement, the beams down there that give support to the house are the same raw beams that were in this house.
Let's look at it today, so. There it is. Now it is unmarked. These are members of, you can see Clay Eels standing on the far left in his red shirt.
I would like to say something, and I will now submit my apologies to Clay regarding the viaduct. I still hold my feelings about it, but no more will I dare to challenge his opinions on this particular thing.
He will have to suffer whatever commute is coming his way. But here is the house. It is as yet unmarked in West Seattle. Down at the end of the street, there is.
I complain about.
No, you're going to leave him alone. Don't give Clay hell for not putting up a plaque. I just think that.
You did it for me.
No, okay. Let's look at the plaque at the end of the street, which doesn't tell you which house was originally Maynard's. And at the end of that street, we have a little plaque put up, what, 20 years ago, Clay?
Yeah.
When?
In the 90s.
Yeah. In 57, Doc Maynard traded 260 acres and moved to West Seattle, to Alki. And this is the oldest standing piece of architecture, but it's down the block from it.
What's the date of the house again?
The house was a replacement for a house that burned down, but it was sold, the house that we just saw was sold from Doc Maynard's estate in 68.
Oh, no, but I mean, when was it first constructed?
Oh, this house?
64.
64, because the last line may not be true about the oldest standing structure in Seattle.
It is.
Boy, that's good. What is it?
I think we have long said, when I used to be associated with Historic Seattle, that it is the two little houses on Ballard Avenue in the historic district. The Ballard Historic District, there's a restaurant there now, but there two houses were moved from the International District there. And the date's pretty close, maybe?
I'm sorry, I won't agree with you on that.
Okay.
Those are later. I will argue that, but although I don't have the evidence acquired, I have a strong sense of what was along that hill in those years. And
in the International District?
Built yet.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it. I couldn't be wrong, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could be wrong too.
Yeah.
Well, you have to, Paul thinks you are, but we have a nickname for Paul, which is Mr. Palimpsest.
Ah.
Palimpsest.
That's terrible.
Well, the palimpsest is the, if you look at the tracings of earlier documents, you can see the palimpsest of history in the streets of Seattle, which Paul has repeatedly demonstrated to me when he walks down a street and says, no, this is what it looked like, and he can go back through the different layers until he reaches fertile farmland or forest.
Did I say something about my archive?
Yes, please.
You want to do it now? Or
Let's finish up and then Paul, because we're 2 slides from the end.
Sure.
This is, of course, this is from a column that appeared only a year ago. And it is due to research by one of our collaborators, Ron Edge, who triangulated a number of photos and found pretty close to the exact location of Princess Angeline's or Kiki Sobu's shack below Western and the water, between Western and Waterfront. And
there have been a lot of postcards produced of this photograph, but not the entire photograph, just the shack, and often hand-colored. But this is the best of the entire postcard that's been found, which wasn't postcard. I can't remember the photographer anymore, but I recognize those hand-inscribed numbers. Was it Judkins?
this was the photograph by, was this Haynes?
No, it's not Haynes.
This is not Haynes. Let's see, so this one, oops.
Queen Angeline and her.
Well, this is on, you know where this is, right? This is on the walkway that comes down from the market to the waterfront. The Pike Place hill climb.
Well, we're going to see it right now. We'll go forward. And the picture that I took of Ron sitting in the same location is particularly appealing to me because we got there and we were wandering around trying to get into this spot. And my fear was that we'd be in some basement or in some garage. And we actually found a little green strip between the Pike Place Market and the Fix-Mador apartment building. And a block down, there's the Pike Street walkway that goes up the hill climb. But this is a green space, so it still faces. Ron is looking out at the sound.
And they need
another
plaque.
plaque.
Here.
I think we need
the evidence. Yeah.
Is this off Western?
This is below Western.
Western's right up in those trees, just beyond it. See, you walk through that little forest and you'll come to Western.
So this is the last.
Yeah, Cliff.
If you go to the market and go to eat at Lowell's and go up to the upper floor, you look straight down right at this.
Yeah.
Go to whom?
Lowell's.
If you sit in the window at Lowell's, you're looking straight down this little path.
Who's Queen Angeline?
Princess Angeline was called Princess Angeline by Catherine Maynard. And the Maynards were of all of the early settlers, were the friendliest to the native peoples. And this is Princess Angeline, or Kiki Soblu, who was the daughter of Chief Seattle. And so she spent much of her life living in that water, just above the waterfront there, and supported herself by washing clothes and selling baskets that she wove herself and posing for photographs as she's doing here in what is now Pike Place Market. And we inset a picture of Chief Seattle for a special reason. Behind her is First Avenue. You can see the streets fronting, the buildings fronting First Avenue behind her. And we inset a photo of her father, which is because when we went back to repeat it, we brought along two direct descendants. And here, on the left is Mary Lou Slaughter, who's a direct descendant of Kiki Soblu, the great-great-great-great-granddaughter. And Mary Lou is 80 years old. This photo was taken about 6 months ago.
That's not fair.
I don't know, she's also a basket weaver and made the cedar shawls that she and Ken Workman, who is the great-great-great-great-grandson of Chief Seattle through his second wife. And so Ken is...
Looks like it comes from Hollywood Central casting, and
This is like George Clooney and, I mean, it's really astonishing how handsome both these people are. So, and while we were taking this photo, Clay was behind me. We spent maybe 10-15 minutes on the street finding the right position, and Clay was behind me taking a picture of me taking a picture. And we had to take off the cedar hats because the shadows they just didn't work. But Ken kept whipping around a couple times, and later we all went down to Ivar's and had a snack. And I said, Ken, what were you jerking around for? And he said, well, I thought my pocket was being picked. And I said, well, how so? He said, well, someone kept inadvertently tapping me on the elbow. And this is where we end our show, but these, I think, are the nudges of history. And I've never been tapped on the elbow, but I have felt...
I never will be.
And Paul never will be, he wants you to know. But I have felt when I lock in a photo and I'm right at that spot and I know I'm looking at the same place that Asher Curtis looked at, or that Oakes looked at, or one of the great photographers of our, documenting our city, or that Wilsa looked at. When I hit that spot, I feel a gentle nudge from their eye, their perspective. So that is basically our show. Paul's going to talk to you now about his archive.
Yeah, I think we should give him a run. Let's give Gene, you should know that really Gene put the book together. He chose the subjects, did all the now shots, took him 3 years of oft interrupted labor. He got a lot of really good help from very competent people, considerably more competent than I am, including, why don't you tell who they are?
Well, we can go down the list, but I want to divert, and I'm going to do this because essentially this is, as far as all of us are concerned, Clay and me and Ron Edge and all those who have helped out and are still helping, this is, we're celebrating the life's work of someone who's created a vision of our city, which is unique in that there are no other places that have this kind of long-range exploration. And so I would say, yes, we spent a lot of time combing through 1,800 columns, but this is the result of your life work, Paul. So a hand for Paul.
At this moment, for about the last year, I would have been preparing my archive, which is fairly large. It's not 1 million items, but how many items is it, Clay?
309,000.
309,000. That's slides, and negatives, and ephemera, and a bunch of other stuff. To give them up and divide it between 2 public archives, one the Seattle Public Library, Vox Populi, and the other one being the the University of Washington, which it doesn't know anything about yet. And the reason for that is the University of Washington is because they have a film program where they take old movie stuff, which I have a whole bunch of, both that I've shot and other people have shot. So I'm going to divide it up that way. But I need to take my archive out of the basements of 2 houses that I am partially, what would be proprietal, but temporarily what's the word?
Ownership.
Ownership, thank you. That's temporary, and so I need to find a warehouse that's air conditioned where I can have a few months to put it all together and start to divide it up, to then divide it and give it to those institutions. So if any of you have access to a space that would be about the size of this room, and perhaps a little more, but no, about the size of this room, and you have cheap rent for it, or want somebody to share it for this purpose of dividing up my archive and give away to these institutions, I'd like to know about it.
Would they get a cookie?
Yeah, okay, they get a cookie.
Thank you all so much for coming. And
Gene, can you run down quickly the details for how to order online?
yeah, so one more time, if you go to pauldorpat.com, you will see on the right-hand side of today's column, every column, a little thing that says pre-order. And soon that pre-order will be a button that will just say order, because the books are, Clay and I are actually picking up a pallet of books tomorrow, and we'll be carting along all these books to our future shows. So.
And just so you know, usually you go to a book signing and you have a book inscribed a certain way. Have no fear, you can do that online. There's a spot where you can indicate how you want it inscribed, and Paul and Gene will do exactly what you want with the books.
And if you want a cartoon, just indicate that. I'm not kidding. If you want a cartoon.
He's a great cartoonist.
No, I'm not. Yeah, mediocre, but anyway, it increases the value of the book by 10 cents.
All right, thank you for coming, everybody.
Now, I don't believe that the ladies of Seattle would have said, tear down this building, we don't like the pigeon.
Maybe not, but they were much more sensitive back in
Oh, were they?
1958. They were concerned about the filth, you know? But you may be right, it may have been that. And I have to say, I think that it's I was looking at my demographic and thinking, you know, pretty much we're to blame for everything at this point.
I work in special collections with I just we did a and giving it to them because they really
No, you know who it was? Rich Brothers. Rich Brothers started at the University of Art. He died 2 weeks ago. He's the founder.
I was gone for years.
I so appreciate it.
Just go to, Paul, all you have to do is tell them to go to your website, and all the events are listed on your website.
You know, your cheeks
Bye-bye. Bye, John.
I've heard that one before. I hope it's not true. There are a lot of good
Oh, I carried it. I carried it as a kid. So I'm Al Linden's son. I don't know if you know that. Yeah, right across the street. I'm third generation Fremont. I'm his grandson, one of them. Al's grandson. So we're still here across the street. Across the street. Yep, still in Fremont. Fourth generation.
I expect to find you there.
And he's going to be curating my dad's stuff because he hung on to everything too. Yeah. I have to go through it all.
You never heard of that before, did you? He just spring this on you, did he?
Oh, yeah, I've known him. I did. I've been on.
Yeah. Good seeing you. Good to see you. You guys look a lot like
You've done all these years. I think I love Seattle. I've been here since 1971. I think its soul and character is in its history and it's in its architecture, sort of being lost. And I so appreciate it. I'm a musician. I play piano and organ. Yeah, I've been playing since here. I moved here in '74 to be a musician and started playing in the blues music. America, everything's so classical. Blues, jazz, blues, funk, America, country. I've been playing all the honky tonk groups. Then plus Street Cadillac, I play around. Still play for 2 years. I've play with them since Ned Melvin. He lives in Mexico. And he comes like we play 4th of July through Labor Day. We always do a show at the Triple Door.
I think he and I were in the Whitworth College choir together.
I would be surprised that's where he went. Yeah.
The thing is, he brought that up at one point. I didn't remember him.
Yeah.
And then he told me, I think he told me that I was singing off key.
that would be something you might say.
Yeah, that would be. Anyway, no, I love the Junior Cadillac. A lot of it.
Yeah, well, we're doing it 2 years from now. We'll be doing our 50th birthday party at the Triple Door. So as long as we stay alive, 2 more years. But thank you so much.